Thomas from London, England. I have a question for you regarding age in wrestling. WWE and TNA both bring back a lot of old stars who are in their late 30s, early to mid 40s, like Chris Jericho, Batista, Rob Van Dam, the Hardys, and the ECW guys in TNA right now. While in some cases this is fine, with Jericho putting over the younger guys and Tommy Dreamer acting as a good nostalgia act, do you think too many of these past stars are being brought back, or do you think more should be brought back? It seems to be happening a lot these days, and sometimes I find it slightly annoying when I turn on my TV and I see Tommy Dreamer, age 43, Rhino, age 38, involved in a main event feud with Bully Ray, age 43, when the TV time could be used to promote and get over younger talent. In a time when wrestling is lacking in the major stars department more than ever, I feel many wrestling companies should be doing more to put themselves in a position where they don't have to rely so much on bringing their old wrestlers back so frequently. Well, you kind of contradicted yourself there in a way, because you mentioned at a time that wrestling has as little star power as it has ever had, which is true. That's part of the reason, I think, why they're bringing these guys back, why they want Batista to come back. They want Brock to stick around. They want Jericho to come back, because they want those stars. They need the star power in their mind, and they've done such a poor job of building up enough younger stars. They built up some, but not enough. So they have to keep going back to the well with the old guys. That's why they do it. So do I think they should do it more often? No, I don't think bringing back more old guys is the answer. But the way that they're being used right now, like the ECW guys, for example, in TNA, I said earlier, I'm so sick and tired of the ECW nostalgia, but I know why they did it. They did it for the New York City tapings, and they're doing it again. They're bringing Tajiri in. Like, it's going to continue with this next batch of tapings. So what you're going to get over the next 2 months of TNA television, if they survive that long, it's going to be ECW, ECW, ECW. The hope, though, is that when they get out of New York, if they soldier on, they'll leave the ECW nostalgia behind. Hopefully it's just a temporary thing, okay? In WWE, they bring back Chris Jericho. They have him work with Bray Wyatt. I don't have a problem with that, because in the end, Bray Wyatt's going to go over. He and Jericho will hopefully have better matches than the one they had at Battleground. Jericho can still go. Yeah, he's older, but he hasn't missed very many steps. So I don't have a problem with that as much. I don't feel like WWE is bringing back a whole ton of old guys. Batista now is gone for the time being. They brought Hogan back, but Hogan doesn't wrestle. Flair, he doesn't wrestle. Sting, I want to talk about this. I'm kind of glad that I used your question. You brought this whole subject of age up, because I made a comment on Twitter the other day about AJ Styles. I said, for as much as AJ Styles is tearing it up right now in New Japan, I mean, he is kicking ass. AJ Styles is having some of the best matches of his career, and he's 37 years old. Okay, he's not as young as he used to be. He's not flying around as much as he used to. In a lot of ways, though, he's a better wrestler now than he was then. He's at his peak. He's in peak form right now. The matches he's having over in that G1 are just, from the ones I've seen 2 of them, but I keep reading reports night after night after night. He's just having the best matches on the show, and that's against some of the best talent in the world right now over in Japan. So I read that, and I see these matches, and I just think, God, WWE passed on this guy. AJ did a bunch of interviews, and when they asked him about WWE, he wasn't against it. You could tell he wanted it. Like, he would have loved to have been able to get a phone call from them, to reach a deal. He would have gladly gone to NXT. He has said this in interviews. So it's not that he didn't want to go, or it was his choice not to go. They just didn't have any interest in him. He never got that phone call. And it makes me shake my head. And people, wrote in when I said I don't understand it, and they said, well, he's 37 years old. He's too old. Why would they invest in somebody who's 37? And I just think that is such bullshit. That is such a bullshit answer. I'm not saying that doesn't factor into their decision. I just think that logic is such trash. Because here's the thing. You can't have a one-size-fits-all rule for all these guys. I know the way things are done now. They have NXT. They have developmental. They're focused on youth. They're focused on the future. It's a lot easier for them to take a guy who's 27 years old, who hasn't worked all over the world and in other promotions, and just teach them your way. Teach them the WWE style. Break them into your system. And you know that if they could stay injury-free, the guy's 27 years old, he could have another 12, 15, 20 years in his career. You could really put the machine behind him, okay? I understand that. But think of the way it used to be during the Monday Night Wars, okay? There were no developmental territories back then. WWE wasn't partnered with OVW. I guess WCW had the power plant, but that wasn't a developmental league, okay? That wasn't the same thing. You had this competition between these two companies raging on. And guys were constantly jumping back and forth. They were jumping ship. They were going from Raw to Nitro, from Nitro to Raw. And there was a guy by the name of Chris Jericho, who I just mentioned. And Jericho he was never a main event guy in WCW. He probably should have been, but he never was. He was never going to have that chance. But he got popular enough to where people liked him, they knew him, they saw the talent in him. And he could see that he was going nowhere. And he went to WWE. And that very first night he made his debut on Raw, it was about 2 months after he signed his contract. Maybe not even 2 months, okay? They didn't keep him out very long. They had the Millennium Countdowns. They hyped him up and hyped him up and hyped him up. And when he made his first appearance, all they did was flash his name on the Titantron, and an entire building of people, 15,000 people, went nuts. You have to think that a lot of those people have never seen Chris Jericho before. I mean, a lot of them did. There were, Jericho signs. Like, clearly people knew who he was. But, I don't know. Do you think the majority of those 15,000 people knew who Chris Jericho was? I'm willing to bet they didn't. But he got this monstrous reaction. And it was another shot fired by WWE, who was already kicking WCW's ass at that point. But they knew they had a talented guy in Jericho. They're not going to hold him on the sidelines. They didn't have an NXT to send him to. He went right to the main roster. He made a big splash. It got people really excited because a lot of people did know who he was. And I know he had a tough time kind of assimilating himself, but that was more politics than anything else, and people, I think, who were just jealous of him and who were worried for their spot. He talks in his book about the issues he had with Triple H, although you hear enough stories where Triple H, it sounds like he was jealous of everybody at that time. But that's politics. That's something else. He didn't have a problem going on Raw and going on the pay-per-views and wrestling people and his style clashing with theirs, and he had great matches, and he became a big part of that roster. AJ Styles kind of fits the same bill. AJ Styles was a main event guy in TNA. In WWE, that doesn't mean anything. So if they bring in AJ Styles to work, let's say at a mid-card level at first, that's fine. I mean, I would have no problem with that. I would almost expect them to. I wouldn't expect AJ Styles to come in and go right into a feud with John Cena or Randy Orton. That would be the end game. You would build him up so that he can be in the main event. He can finally, John Cena will have a new opponent, and Randy Orton will have somebody new to work with. He can work with Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, and maybe they even do something with AJ and Triple H. There's a million different things that they could do. There's a million different opponents he could have. He's a big enough star where he's got a name, he's got a profile for himself. And right now, even at 37, I don't know about you, but it looks like to me he's in the prime of his career. He's having the best matches of his career. He's going out there. He's kicking ass. He doesn't look like he's 37 years old. You never know when his body's going to break down. So this whole notion that, well, he's too old. He's too old. He's fucking awesome. And when you have a guy who's fucking awesome, you take advantage of that. What is with this one-size-fits-all? Well, we have a policy now. We're not going to take guys who are over the age of 32. Or we have this policy where, unless your name is Sting and you're 56 years old and we're just bringing you in for, a one-time gig, anybody else, you've got to go down to NXT and you've got to hone your craft and you've got to be down there for a minimum of 3 months. What is this shit? Why does there have to be a rule for every single person? Why can't a guy like AJ Styles become available? And look, a guy like AJ Styles does not just fall out of the sky into your lap, okay? He still had 11 years or whatever of exposure on major cable television. You know what he's capable of. He's willing to come in and learn and work, and you let a guy like that go. Why? Because he's too old? Because he's too small? I don't know about small. Daniel Bryan and CM Punk seem like they did very well for themselves. They signed Kenta. They signed Devitt. They're not exactly giants. So it must have something to do with the age issue, and it just pisses me off because you can't have this one-size-fits-all rule for everybody. AJ Styles should be the exception. A guy like him doesn't just become available like that. So if that's what was holding him back, and I don't know if it was, but people were saying that to me, it just pissed me the hell off. Like, who gives a shit if he's 37 years old? The guy's fucking great. He's not showing any signs of slowing down anytime soon. Now's the time to pick him up, strictly for that reason. Because 10 years from now, he may not be able to have these matches anymore. You can't think about 10 years down the road with a guy like AJ Styles. That's what guys like Tyler Breeze and Adrian Neville are for. Okay? Those are the guys you want to invest in and you expect them to be around 10 years from now. AJ is a guy that you bring in and you use him now because you need bodies. You need stars. So to let a guy like that go and now to see what he's doing in Japan, I mean, it's cool to see, but it's a real failure on the part of WWE. Jim Ross interviewed AJ Styles on his podcast a few weeks ago, and he said one of his biggest missteps was not signing the guy. It doesn't matter that he's 37 years old. You can still go after the guy. This one-size-fits-all bullshit is so stupid to me. I mean, if you had the same mentality back 15, 20 years ago during the Monday Night Wars, boy, let me tell you, that time period in wrestling wouldn't have been nearly as much fun as it was.